Who remembers us? Do you remember you? I remember my grandfather, Frank Sibley, born in Los Angeles in 1918. He was baptized at Olvera Street. He worked for the Union Pacific Railroad during the war and later on sold air conditioning, but he never got his own air conditioning until he retired in the 1980s. I remember my grandma Vicky, born in Highland Park in 1917. Her mother lost a daughter a year later in the Spanish flu. Grandma worked at Sears and Roebuck for 30 years, even though she had a hunchback. She lived in Inglewood for over 50 years and never moved away. Lee Beck remembers his father Luther, a house painter and a preacher who always kept his house open to people in need. Lee remembers swimming and fishing in the American River. Emi Motokawa remembers her mother Fujiko, who came to Los Angeles from Tokyo when she was 40. Fujiko waited tables in Little Tokyo for 7 years before she opened up her own restaurant in Monterey Park. Who remembers us? Ruben Buvada remembers his father who taught him how to sing. Tracy Kato Kiriyama remembers her grandfather who was put in a concentration camp and lost his land twice after it was taken by the government. The second time his nursery was taken, it was for building the 405 freeway. Reverend Ray Fukumoto remembers his classmates from Roosevelt High School. They graduated 60 years ago. Alan Gamalinda Aquino remembers his late parents and his grandmother who taught him poetry. He can tell you about the Filipino poblador who came to Los Angeles in 1781. Louisette Resto remembers her mother in the South Bronx and her father still in Puerto Rico. Ask her to tell you about the island's real history. F. Douglas Brown remembers growing up in Hunters Point, San Francisco. His father was born in Mississippi and his Filipino mother born in Salinas. They named him after Frederick Douglass. Who remembers us? David Maldonado, a fourth-generation Boyle Heights native, remembers his great-grandparents' barbershop on East 1st Street. Yoko Elaine Takahashi remembers her mentor Don Nakanishi from UCLA. He was a pioneering professor in Asian American studies. Amy Umatsu remembers her grandfather F.M. Umatsu, a legendary flower farmer that brought camellia flowers from Japan to America in the 1930s. Years later, he sold 300,000 camellias to the founders of Descanso Gardens just before he was sent to Manzanar. David Moncawa remembers to take care of his 99-year-old mother and 96-year-old stepfather. The Save Our Seniors Network remembers 134 Japanese-American senior citizens who died during COVID, even though there was only 398 beds. They remember all the promises Cairo made about culturally sensitive care, and it is when people stop remembering the promises they made that profit gets put over public interest. Greed happens when the commodity is placed over the community. CEOs take secret golden parachutes, selling their interest to the highest bidder. The Save Our Seniors Network remembers all the broken promises. Who remembers us? And this is why history is important. James W. Lowen wrote that emotion is the glue that makes history stick. And much more than facts, we remember stories. What's your story? Citizens need to become their own historians. Learn our ancestors' stories. Dialogue with the landscape. Acknowledgement leads to awakening. Liberation comes from understanding. Understanding transmutates across generations. Reverberating with our ancestors, generations of ancestors, families of families, grandparents of grandparents. How far back do we all go? How far forward will we grow? The energy ripples concentric circles, galaxies in our bloodstream, gratitude into infinity. And when we remember who we are, why we believe what we do, alignment remains true. Who remembers us? Do you remember you? Who remembers us? Do you remember you? Who remembers us?